not yet done with Melty Blood at the time of this recording, as we only have reached the surface. And as I talk more about the series, I want to slowly drip into talking about the remake. So I think the best character for this is Red Arcueid, as in the original story she isn't really used much. So first I'll go over her original origin, then Melty Blood React, then Cadenza, and then Actress again. And finally, Type Lumina. Red Arcueid comes from the concept of Arcueid losing control of herself and growing a desire for blood. As vampire emotions are linked to their bloodlust, they tend to fall in love with people and then want to kill them, or, well, take their blood. Despite how Arcueid may seem, she constantly represses her emotions, so when she meets Shiki, who allows her to feel emotions, it's harder to control those emotions. Arcueid eventually falls in love with Shiki, and Red Arcueid becomes a possibility. She has a much harder time controlling her bloodlust. That being said, Arcueid only has slips of bloodlust in the original story of Tsukihime, hence why I call it a concept, as Arcueid always manages to control it. Though one may question, what is an unrepressed Arcueid like? How emotional is she? Melty Blood React has Red Arcueid become a living entity due to White Lin's ability for one whole night. For one whole night, she is no longer bound to just being a concept, but is a real thing similar to how she was when she was a tardy. Despite this, when she encountered White Lin, she showed distaste for her, as she isn't the real Lin and instantly goes for her throat despite knowing she will disappear if White Lin dies. White Lin is similar to Red Arcueid, a repressed version of Lin. Lin isn't very talkative, White Lin however is. So what exactly is the difference between Arcueid and Red Arcueid? In this game, she isn't really subtle in what she wants, compared to Arcueid, who tend to mince her words sometimes. Whereas she is also very much violent and is a rampaging psychopath, she's also, well, less in control of her actions. She seemed almost manic. Well, is manic. Unlike Arcueid, who typically always feel like she's in control, Red Arcueid never feels in control of anything, not even her own fate. But how does this translate to gameplay? After all, Melty Blood is a fighting game. Well, it translates actually really well. Red Arcueid has a lot more pressure tools than Arcueid, as well as super armor, making you feel like a rampaging vampire like how Red Arcueid is. Not much is different between her and Cadenza and React, but there is one exception, being her final battle with Arcueid. The arcade/story mode is much different in Cadenza as it was in React. For the most part, the story is different, as well as the same. I'll get to that another point in time. But basically, the story structure in Cadenza is much like this. You fight your rival on your third, fourth fight, and then you fight your final battle. In React, you will fight your rival, then you will fight White Lin, and then you will fight Anko. Here, it's much different. This is our first interaction between Red Arcueid and Arcueid, and honestly, I really like it. Red Arcueid finally confronts Arcueid about herself. Red Arcueid talks about how much Arcueid repressed her, and how Red Arcueid wants Arc to stop ignoring her. It's not like the request of hers is outrageous, it's actually a reasonable request. She also mentions how much she is repressing herself, that she has so much of a personality to begin with. As Red Arcueid wins, she surmises one thing. She wasn't that powerful. Arcueid could have beaten her, couldn't she? She was once more powerful at one point. So what exactly stopped her from killing her? She would have been dead if it was her old self. So she comes up with one conclusion, that the reason she could beat her wasn't due to the fact that she was strong, but because she was killed before. The person who killed her was actually Shikitono. At the beginning of Tsukihime, he cuts her body into 17 pieces. So Red Arc finally set her eyes on Shiki. And this is also the first time she calls Shiki, well, Killer-san. Or Killer, but be sure to keep this in mind as this will be important to mention later on. And after a second, Red Arc goes on a murder spree as she still can only exist for a single night due to the influence of an individual similar to the previous games. The individual being this time another form of Tatari, however is Sion known as Dust of Osiris. Here, Red Arc is enjoying her carnage a lot more. We also have our favorite rival fight again, Red Arcueid vs CL. However, I find this one vastly interesting. Unlike the previous two games where CL was just shocked to see Arcueid involved in such carnage, here she sees her again and is justified in what she believes in. CL believes that all vampires should be killed and that there's no exception, not even Arcueid, the true ancestor. Red Arcueid insists on something different, however. She insists that, well, CL isn't even caring about her morals or anything like that. She just simply wants to kill her. She can't hide her bloodlust, similar to how she has such high bloodlust. The only difference is she's much more proud of it. After the fight is over, she makes a different comment than she does in all the other games. In all the other games, she will constantly say this, well, I guess you're only good for one thing, you can't be killed. Here, she actually comment on how much fun she had. If only it was just a bit longer, more than just 2 minutes. Her conversation with Riesbyfe? However, I'll just call her Res. Her conversation with Res, in their conversation, they talk about how they're both fakes, how they know that they only exist for one night. They only exist because of a certain entity. They can't exist on their own, and so they shouldn't try to be real. However, Red Arcueid persists on just being real. She is real. She won't accept that she isn't real. Riz in response suggests that they should do as they would normally do then. As she is a member of the church, it is her duty to kill vampires. And as she is a vampire, it's her duty to defend herself. Finally, we reach a conclusion with the Dust of Osiris boss battle. The conversation between Dust of Osiris and Red Arcueid is probably the best description of what Red Arcueid wants. Dust of Osiris says, how come we aren't working together? Shouldn't we have the same goal in mind? However, Red Arcueid says there's no point in destroying everything if there's no humans left. She wants to destroy and kill, but only if there's people there to react to what she's doing. Red Arcueid seems to have one desire, that desire being an audience. An audience that views her as a certain thing, a tragic heroine. She may be more in control of her actions, but she's still tragic in her eyes. She doesn't view the killing of others as her fault. She views it as something natural that she has to do to satisfy herself. She doesn't want to kill because it's just fun to kill. She wants to kill people that are real, that have her stage be real, to be acknowledged by real people. Multi-Blood type Lumina takes place in Tsukihime Remake universe. One would think that talking about all the prior games up to this point, then talking about what may be a different character would be kind of pointless. And normally you would be right, however Red Arcueid is a different beast entirely. For one, Red Arcueid does appear in Tsukihime Remake. Red Arcueid appears after Shiki kills Arc a second time in CL Route. Arcueid is also much more different in the remake. In the remake, she had less control in her bloodlust, as well as is more emotional. There are a lot of differences between remake Arcueid and normal Arcueid. But to list a few, she's very much more caring about her appearance. Normal Arcueid flaws are much more apparent in this version, as well as having completely different flaws as well. Like for example, once again, remember how I mentioned how Arcueid is trendy? In the old game, she wasn't really trendy. In fact, she didn't care much about modern society. This was shown through her weird way of fashion. She wore a long skirt because it was, well, a granny skirt. We call it granny skirt because she's so out of fashion. But that's the point. She is out of fashion and out of touch. Whereas this Arcueid not only cares much more about what's in fashion, but she cares much more about her appearance that she even changes her dresses for fights as well as dates. This all together results in her caring much more for Shiki. She cares so much more that she ends up attacking Noelle this time around. Where her blood slip was something small and was a little bit out of her control, she still managed to control it. Here, she barely manages to control it. In fact, she runs away because she couldn't control it at all. This eventually leads to the second time where Shiki had to kill her. In this point of the story, she has a lot of feelings for Shiki. However, Shiki has grown out of his feelings for Arcueid and has feeling for Ciel more so. Not taking lightly to the news that Shiki likes Ciel, she ends up practically trying to kill him and turn him into a vampire. Shiki in self-defense kills her. We all believe that Arcueid is dead until finally, as if Earth was saying she must come back, Red Arcueid returns. Red Arcueid is weirder than you may think. When she appears like she comes from a different dimension, posing an incredible threat to everyone, but is still defeated by Ciel by the end of the route because it's the Ciel route. But there's a lot of things alluding to the idea that she comes from a different timeline, from the original Tsukihime timeline. A lot of things she say as well as her reaction is very much in line with how, well, old Tsukihime timeline was. Almost as if she knows Ciel and Shiki. It seemed like she has more knowledge of Shiki, Arcueid, and Ciel more so than all three in this timeline at this time. She's even weirder in type Lumina, as similar to Saber, no character has specified win quotes against her. Her story is a made-up story made by Arcueid. A scenario where what if she rampaged throughout the town as Red Arcueid. The scenario behind it is Shiki killed Arcueid similar to how the Ciel route. In fact, a lot of her interactions is very much from the Ciel route. Two conclusions I came up with for the story and interactions is either A, this is a scenario where 1, it takes place after the Ciel route, or during the Ciel route. This is one of Arcueid's fears of what might happen to her, or B, Red Arcueid pops herself into a new route, one that is not discovered by the Tsukihime Club. Story-wise, when Ciel and Red Arcueid fight, their conversation is much different than prior games. Here, it's kinda weird. In all the previous versions, she was provoked by Arcueid. Here, once again, she is provoked by Arcueid, but she doesn't have her bloodlust. Ciel is much more trying to do it for her job, but she doesn't seem any bloodlustful, and Red Arcueid doesn't point this out. Instead, she just calls her dog of the church. But her interaction is very different when you fight her in the beginning. In the beginning, she does mention, well, having fought her again and that you will put her down again. So, you see where I come up with my conundrum, right? Her intro with Arcueid has her call Arc a fake, when in game prior, before this, she was the one who acknowledged Arcueid as the real deal, and Arcueid would be the one to reject her. Even her victory quote go along the line of saying that she is a different version from her, a new version as so. Her final story with Roa, however, showed her actually conflicted on her goals as Red Arc, is still an Arcueid who loves Shiki. Similar to how vampires' emotion gets stirred with their bloodlust, here the same thing happens. She acknowledges her actions will make Shiki suffer, but she also knows that she wants to still go with it. This could be similar to Arcueid repressed emotions for Shiki while wanting him all to herself. It's very clear that she does want this, especially in the remake where she makes it pretty clear that she only wants Shiki to herself. But in the end, this all ends up being a horror story made by Arcueid in bad taste. But she also says that there's some truth to it. I believe that Red Arcueid will be much more important in future installments, and that she is playing the role of an actor once again. I think this role of actor is something very important to her that she doesn't want to let go. However, she has seemed to let more and more go of the tragic heroine that she believes herself to be. Here, she takes up the role of villain. Red Arc went from being a concept from a spin-off game to a character in a mainline game. She went from a rampaging psycho to a rampaging actress who aimed to be acknowledged and noticed. She went from playing the tragic heroine to being the villain. This isn't something that happens often in literature or media. In fact, usually you always have one thing be consistent. However, her constantly changing into this role, well, not really changing or constant, but more so it's gradually happened over the course of the games. I don't think Red Arcueid's story is over. I think that in possible installments of Type Lumina, we will see more and more about her character that she is creating. I think in future games we will see what she wants others to view her as well as her self-identity, how she views herself. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Hopefully next time this isn't as long as the analysis, but no promises because it's going to be a while.